Alright, welcome back, guys. We missed one of the spellcraft cards, Copperhall Bracers, the 3 cost that says when the wielder hits the enemy player, play a Justice Sigil from your deck. Spellcraft 1, play Copperhall Blessing, which is a 4 cost double green spell that makes all of your units invulnerable to damage this turn. This card's nuts. So at 3, you are putting a really big weapon on something, or at 4, rather. You probably don't play this at 3 unless you're trying to sneak something across off of like a Bart or something like that. But like, yeah, this actually does belong on Bart in a pretty big way. So yeah, Copperhall Bracers. So this card is kind of just straight up nuts. Like as a 4/0, like you get to, let's say we always play this at 4 because playing at 3 is reasonable but not amazing. But if you play this at 4, then you get to attack for roughly 6 to 7 damage pretty easily, along with any other units that you have for basically free. The 6 to 7 damage is almost guaranteed to get through or to kill something that is going to be one of your opponent's cards, so you'll get value out of Copperhall Bracers immediately because you're either going to be doing a ton of damage, which you want to do, and if you do the damage, then you get a Justice Sigil, which is even better, so you're up a card then, or you're going to be trading in with one of your opponent's cards, so you're up a card that way. So either way, playing Copperhall Bracers on 4 into a board where your opponent basically doesn't have Annihilate or something along those lines, like, yeah, it's not gonna really work out. So like, yeah, this is basically nuts. Like, you can do some ridiculous shenanigans with this. Like, it is almost always going to be card advantage to you, and it is a really solid trick to end the game, which is fairly important. It gives you the Justice Sigil ramp if you actually get the attack across, which is good on its own, and you can do this if you're playing into a board with no units, so that's something reasonable that you can actually set up with. It's good on flyers, it's good on Aegis units, and it's good on Bartholo the Seducer, so I think all of those things are well worth it. And yeah, this is kind of crazy. But we plan to talk not just about spellcraft cards today, we're also going to talk about Inspire cards. So let's go ahead and go with the first and most exciting one, Breeze Dancer. So Inspire is a keyword ability or an ability word that gives units you draw something when you draw them. So it's kind of a Warcry style thing where you are actually getting a benefit from your unit being out on the field. The 2/4 Breeze Dancer with Inspire essentially gives you Crown of Possibilities random battle skill on a unit. So this is not extremely powerful by itself, but it's obviously very good with a wild amount of other things that benefit from battle skills or that give other things battle skills. You can do some simply crazy shenanigans with this. At 4 cost double blue, it's a little bit tricky to play with, but I would say that Crown decks are going to want to run 4 of them just because it's fun, and because Crown decks are all about the fun. And yeah, they're not really going to be too hurting by running a card that is somewhat torch immune, can't be vanquished, and happens to give units random battle skills every time that you draw them. So Inspire is pretty crazy stuff and can be kind of ridiculous as far as things go. Let's go ahead and look at all of the like really good Inspire cards. There are a lot of them, and there are some really fantastic options available. First off is Magus of Celerity. This was spoiled on, I think, SkiJ's stream. 3 cost Fire and Time for a 3/3 that says units you draw get charge, and when you summon it, you get to scout as well. So 3 for a 3/3, not bad at all, just by itself. Like, that is actually a really reasonable thing to be playing. The charge ability does not go on Magus of Celerity, but if you're paying 3 for a 3/3 with scout, you're really not actually all that unhappy with it. I would say that is fairly reasonable as far as things are going. Someone's asking what's going on with this guy's arm. I haven't actually looked at the art on this, but I don't think that's his arm. I think that's his beard, and I have no idea. He's got a wicked beard. So giving your units charge is crazy. Like, there are some interesting shenanigans you can get to with Praxis if you are giving your units charge when you draw them. Like, if you draw a World Bearer Behemoth with charge, you might just win the game on the spot. It is absolutely absurd if you can do that. And yeah, it's kind of crazy to run this out on a Sandstorm Titan or a Heart of the Vault or any other number of like ridiculous things. Magus of Celerity really does benefit like a lot of cards that you would really like it to benefit, and the Scout ability allows you to more easily search for the unit that you want to give charge to. So if he sticks around on the board for even one turn, he's very likely to give something charge, and that's a really reasonable benefit. So I would say this card is actually fairly strong both in limited and in draft. He's very, very good in limited, but he might even be better in rank setups. Like, there's just some cool stuff there. Okay, Temple Shihan. I don't think we know what Inferiority Complex is yet, but Temple Shihan gives units flying whenever you draw them, which can be an extremely effective benefit. The 3/3 ability, the 3/3 for 3 with flying, basically, or it doesn't have flying by itself. Yeah, like this one is on the weaker side. I think the flying ability on units is really beneficial, but this card is a little bit less likely to actually draw the thing that you want. It's really a question of whether or not Inferiority Complex does the things that you want it to do. And if it does do good things, then this card can clearly do some good control and do some cool things in limited. I would say, like, this seems like it might be a very strong card. We'll have to see what Inferiority Complex does before we know anything more about it, but could be okay. Journey Guide. This one is a 1-cost 0/3 and has Inspire, reduce the cost of units that you draw by 1. So for an Explorer, this is fairly solid. Like, this card functions as ramp in the same way that an Initiative Sands might, except that it's not an Initiative Sands, which means that it's not a mage, amongst other things, and therefore it can ramp to some pretty cool Sentinels very early and do some nice things with them. This is even better if you consider that this benefit stays around even after Journey Guide is gone. So reducing the cost of, say, your Worldbearer Behemoth or your Shadowlands Tyrant or any number of other cards like Heart of the Vault or other bananas junk, like, you can do some really cool things with Journey Guide because you can recur those cards and play them for like significantly better benefits. The thing that we haven't really talked about with Inspire yet is that Inspire is very good on Echo units and any unit with Fate abilities, or any unit that is just like, or any unit that just like gets like extra copies of itself or can be drawn multiple times. So like, one of the things that you can do with Journey Guide is that you can play a Journey Guide, you can basically just draw a Teriax Hatchling on your turn. You can use Second Sight or Twinning Ritual to draw that Teriax Hatchling again. Now that Teriax Hatchling costs 1 and is like a 3/2 flyer. So yeah, there's some really interesting benefits to just constantly redrawing your cards. I would say this card is not very strong in a limited format, but it has some potential in ranked ramp decks because it can just do kind of ridiculous things with lots and lots of card draw, with good Echo cards, and of course with Mysterium Orb and all of the Explorer-based synergy with Explorers and Sentinels. Like, you can actually make some cool things happen with this card. It's not really got good stats, or it does not have good stats, so it's a little bit harder to play in a limited format. I would say that playing a unit without any hope of necessarily using it to do something cool makes it pretty difficult. But this is definitely a card that you could use in ranked in some really fascinating decks. And Explorer is a really good thing to have because Explorers and Sentinels like just need a good 1-drop, and there's not that many of them at the moment. Okay, what else has... we have lots of different things. Okay. Oh, here we go. That's not it. Dusk Raider. Dusk Raider has a very powerful Inspire. Dusk Raider is a 2/2 bear. It is 2/2 for 2. Inspire, units you draw get Berserk, and summon Nightfall. So yeah, like, this one is probably the strongest, just immediate, like, this is a solid option as far as things go. As a 2-cost 2/2 with Summon Nightfall, like, it already kind of fits in some decent Nightfall decks, but the Berserk ability is just a really good thing to be putting on units in the first place, and can be just bananas on units that don't have it. And since it summons with Nightfall, you get to draw an extra card on your turn, which means that if Dusk Raider sticks around for even one turn, it can really turn your deck into a bit of a meat grinder. This doesn't have the kind of immediate impact that you want from like an absolutely bananas 2-drop, but I would say that overall, like, it's just doing enough right on face at 2 that you're going to be really, really happy to be playing this card. So yeah, this is either going to be solid in ranked or limited. I would say in both of them it's fairly even on strength, but certainly has some potential in tier 2 to tier 1 decks. Okay, I think that's all of the Inspire cards. There's still a lot of other stuff out there. Oh, Frontier Bard. Frontier Bard is a 2/4 for 3. When one or more of your other units hits the enemy player, Frontier Bard gets +1 strength, and Inspire units you draw get Overwhelm. Okay, so this one is unusual. You can play this on 3 into a fairly aggressive board, like a couple of Grenadin drones, maybe a Bladekin or an Oni Ronin or a Pyro Knight, and just attack in and get this thing to be like a 4/4 very, very quickly. So that kind of stat line is actually kind of interesting and could be very good on fairly aggressive units. The Inspire ability doesn't actually give you a ton of benefit, but like there is certainly some potential for this to not only enable Frontier Bard further, but also just give you the kind of push that you need in a really aggressive red deck to get going. I would say overall this card has some potential in either limited or ranked. It's not immediately the best card in the world. You kind of need it to be really, really aggressive. I would say that there's probably a ranked deck that would like it. All right. And yeah, Frontier Bard is solid stuff as far as art goes. Okay, so I think that's it for the Inspire cards. Let's talk about all of the remainder. We have a new power card. It's called Chairman's Contract. As you can clearly see from the contract, it's her chairman. If you play this card, you get 1 power, you get no influence, and you discard the top 2 cards of your deck. So, as a power card, that's really interesting for a variety of reasons. Maybe you play this in Shadow decks or Stirring Sand decks or any sort of monocolored deck that wants to do recursion effects, and you get some benefit out of it by dark returning or grasping at shadows or stirring sanding the things that you have discarded. It's nice to have those kind of discard options. Like, you could certainly do some cool things with that. But the main thing that this card is for is to trigger Tribute, because we already know that Tribute triggers if a unit enters your void, and it doesn't matter if it's from your deck, from your hand, or from your board. So as long as you can put a unit into your void, you can trigger Tribute without having to pay for it in any way. And we have a cycle of cards that'll allow you to pay 1 to trigger Tribute, but Chairman's Contract will allow you to trigger a Tribute merely off of playing the power. It isn't going to work every time, but it's going to work a pretty decent percentage of the time, especially if you're running like a 30-unit Tribute deck. So could be fairly reasonable. The power isn't depleted, that's entirely true, so it's not that bad to play. Like, I think overall you're pretty happy to play this as long as your deck is somewhat influence light, and discarding the top 2 cards of your deck could really lead to a lot of shenanigans as far as shenanigans are concerned. One of the things I don't like about this card is that we have these end cards, right? And they have warp. And Chairman's Contract can discard those cards, which is a little bit rough because you'll get into a situation where you'll have a Chairman's Contract in your hand and you'll want to trigger warp. You'll want to trigger the Tribute on your warp card, but if you do, you'll discard your warp card. I guarantee you somebody will do that by accident at least once, but they'll probably deserve it. It's fine, it's fine. Like, overall, I think that this card is just an excellent Tribute trigger. It's probably going to see a lot of play in Influence Light decks that want to do Tributes, and like the ability to trigger Tribute for free is really, really important. So like, we do need this card for that reason. I'm not sure how many decks it's going to go into. It's obviously not a high pick in draft, but if you have a bunch of Tribute cards, maybe you do grab this. Maybe if you have the ability to recur things, you can do some cool things as well. But yeah, we'll see. Overall, like, This card looks really interesting, and I'm glad that we have a 0-cost tribute trigger, because that's just kind of awesome. Speaking of cool tributes, here's something that actually plays really well with Chairman's Contract in a mono red deck. Honor the Ancestors. 3 cost, draw a weapon from your void. Tribute, play the weapon instead. So, like, right away, fire, Chairman's Contract. Honor the Ancestors, sort of the Sky King. That's not a bad setup. Seems okay. You can use this to just like throw a Callus out or a Last Word or any number of other ridiculous relic weapons. So there's some banana stuff that you could just immediately play that could be really, really good. Like overall, this card looks like it's just got insane potential for shenanigans in ranked decks, and I can definitely see it in some Rakano, Stone Scar, maybe even like other types of decks that could actually like really just benefit from playing weapons very cheaply. This is weapon recursion, and it's actually the cheapest weapon recursion that we've ever seen. So this plays really well with cards like Molten Fist as well, where you can get a lot of extra armor on the weapon, and then you can immediately play it and do crazy things with it that way. You do have to play units and weapons together, which is a little bit rough. The tribute is somewhat tricky. So I don't know if this is going to make it in like straight armory decks, but I definitely see this card being used to create some utterly ridiculous shenanigans, and we'll definitely put it in some Rakano armory decks that we have been running, particularly the weapon-focused ones that rely on Molten Fist. Yeah, this card should see some sort of nuts like tier 1 list. I think it's definitely got potential. I don't know how it plays in Limited. I think overall you're pretty happy to have this. Should be good to have that kind of recursion. Here's a small one. Disrupt. 3 cost, kill an enemy relic or silence an enemy unit. Useful little spell, not very good. Probably you don't play it in ranked, but seems like a reasonable pickup in draft. I don't have too much to say about this. It's colorless, which means that you kind of want it to be fairly weak. And the fact that it is a choice card in colorless is really interesting. So, maybe this is a card that you play in either format, but it's slow and not, like, great. It's a good choice. Like, it is 2 things that you really want to do. But the question is going to be, like, are you actually going to spend a card slot on it? And I think in ranked, that's probably not going to be the case. All right. What else? I am going at almost completely random. We got Fenris Nightshade. Fenris Nightshade is a 2 cost 3/2, much like his sister, Fenris Nightshade. Once per turn, you may pay 3 to draw a card. Fenris deals 3 damage to you and 1 damage to each cursed enemy. Okay, a lot to break down there, but overall, the main thing to note here is that this is a 3/2 for 2, which is already a good stat line, that draws you cards, which seems kind of insane. Like, I would say that this card is just outright bonkers. Like, you can play this with Mirrors and feel pretty happy about it. The cursed enemy damage thing isn't necessarily going to be that important, but it works okay, and it gives you a little bit more benefit if you have your opponent cursed with something, or if you are running some sort of, like, fairly aggressive stuff. 3 and 3 damage is a lot to pay for a card, but basically anything that gives you cards is always solid, and this is completely optional once a turn. Seems like it's going to be something that you can use to pull all sorts of interesting threats. I would say that control decks are going to be pretty happy to have this. This is a must kill most of the time, and it seems well worth it to just stick Fenris on the board and keep him out there for as long as possible. If you give this card lifesteal and you have a bunch of curses, not only does he not deal damage to you, which is great, but also he deals damage to the cursed enemies and gets more lifesteal that way. And yeah, you're getting card advantage out of it, so seems solid. Yeah, this guy seems real interesting and should be pretty bonkers in any sort of aggressive Argenport or Shadow list. Like, I would say he's probably got some potential to make some really aggressive decks a lot better. Surso's Choice. I think we have all the choices now. I think we've actually seen all of them at this point. There's a Jex choice in here as well. So Cerstos is you get an Aegis and 6 health, which is the option that is really, really solid for basically just making sure that you don't get murdered by a Channel of the Tempest. Or deal 2 damage to each unit, which as a fast spell Lightning Storm seems pretty good. Like, this is probably one of the more playable choices of the batch. It's pretty cheap to play. It's got fairly powerful effects, like the Lightning Storm is just good, and like the Aegis plus 6 health is actually pretty good as well. Like, you feel pretty good about using that to counter some sort of face spell like a Rain of Frogs, and you might actually feel okay about using it to just gain yourself 6 life and an Aegis. I would say that's not the most amazing thing to do, but as an end of turn trick in a situation where you're just trying to deal with some other type of deck, like, yeah, maybe this card actually sees a little bit of play. Yeah, you don't usually want to face Aegis yourself, but it works against unitless and it works against aggro in a Legion. I'd say that's relatively powerful, something you're actually going to want to run. Oh, Lumen Attendant. This is an interesting one, and this is clearly a card that has seen a little bit of development. 4 costs 3/3, Voidbound. Ultimate, pay 3, discard a card to draw another card from your Void, and play a 1/1 Wisp. There's a lot here. So this is recursion for spells, and there's not a lot of that. There's actually very, very few cards that get spells back from your Void. So a 7 cost for a 3/3 and a 1/1, and also you get a spell back from your Void, but also you discard a card is interesting. I'm not 100% certain if it's going to be good or not. I would say that paying 4 for a 3/3 and then using this at 3 is probably going to be okay. Paying 7 for it, I thought gave you card advantage, but the discard ability makes it a little bit tricky. I think it's actually better as a card to pay the 4 for it first and then pay 3 to discard the card to draw a card from your Void, primarily because you can trigger tributes this way, which means that Lumen Attendant in really, really big, like New Tomorrow style decks can throw out units to draw end cards, which is pretty solid. Like, you can use this to just grab End of Hostilities, clone a bunch of Lumen Attendants, and play even more End of Hostilities. That's a fairly solid infinite combo with a pile of power. So yeah, you can just do like a ridiculous amount of stuff that way. It is Voidbound because, yeah, this card would be utterly insane if it weren't Voidbound. You definitely have the ability to reduce the cost of this card and just make insane combos happen. And I think the more that you can do that, the better off that you are. I really see this card in some sort of insane End of Hostilities deck. The question is going to be, can you really do that? And whether or not it's going to be the kind of ridiculous nonsense that you want. This card has some potential to be broken and insane. I'm all for it. I would say that it's definitely a New Tomorrow type of card. It's a Marshall Ironthorn Big Combre kind of card. You can do some really, really strange things with this card, and the recursion ability is very, very good. So, yeah, this sees play in Ranked. I don't think it's amazing, but it sees play in Ranked. So, could be solid. Alright. What else? We got Jack's Choice. Jack is Stonesgar now. 5 cost, play a +1/+1 weapon on each of your attacking units, or kill an enemy unit not wielding a weapon. In my mind, this might actually be the best of the choices. It's a fast spell removal card that kills anything, except units with weapons, which, like, I don't know how many units actually have weapons that you want to kill most of the time. Like, it is a little bit sad that you can't ever get like a 2-for-1 with Jack's Choice, but I don't know. It really depends on whether or not you think your opponent's playing a lot of weapons on units, and that doesn't actually happen all that often in Ranked. So probably this is just like an unconditional fast spell most of the time. Seems good. The play a +1/+1 weapon on each of your attacking units thing can be used after blocks, which means that you can use this to just sweep up a board in a really, really fantastic and spectacular fashion. Yeah, and also, like, +1/+1 weapons benefit some other effects. Like, you can actually use this to draw a bunch of cards off of Quartermaster, make bigger attacks with your green card, the 2/2 that attacks gets bonuses for every weapon that you have. Like, there's a lot of interesting things that Jack's Choice can do in terms of just sweeping the board and making ridiculous things happen. Neither side is particularly unbalanced. They're both probably more like 4-cost effects that you're happy to play for 5. I would say this card is actually very strong. And it's really, really good in Limited. Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's outright outrageous in Limited. Insatiable Ceresaur. A 3/3 for 4 that when it attacks, spends your remaining power to give it that much strength and health. So this is a dinosaur version of the Copperhall, the X-cost +1/+1 weapon. You can tell Pojo's getting a little bit tired. There's an X-cost Sentinel that gives you Power Surge that can get plus strength every time. Insatiable Ceresaur is not quite that card. It's actually a little more flexible than that. But it does have some interesting options in Haunting Scream style decks. I don't know how powerful this card is overall. Like, it seems relatively flexible and pretty likely to be okay with just sort of soaking up all of your power. But if you're trying to play any sort of fast spell cards with Insatiable Ceresaur, you're not going to get good benefits from it. It's a bond engine, and an interesting one at that, and it's probably a very, very powerful limited card. I don't think that it has quite the stats to get there in ranked. It's just not coming down for enough. It's very torchable, but it can get out of control pretty fast. I'd say the amount that it kind of messes with your ability to use spells means that you might not want to use this in ranked, but could be cool. All right, we're almost done. Let's talk about Lethral Provocateur, because this one definitely made some waves. 3/5 deadly. Infiltrate. The enemy player discards all weapons from their deck for 4. So this is like Steward of the Past stats, which already pretty good. Like, that is hard to kill, somewhat obnoxious, except instead of hating on units in the void, it hates on Armory. And it hates on Ikaria Blue. And it really, really doesn't like those decks at all. And, like, you can tell how much it doesn't like those decks by all of the different things that it does. First off, it is real good at dealing with Throne Warden. It's pretty decent at fighting with Ikaria. It doesn't get killed by Auric Runehammer or Sword or Starsteel Daisho without Daisho at least trading 1-for-1 with it. It can't be torched, it can't be vanquished, and it's, you know, harsh rollable at least, but ooh, yeah. So basically every Armory card it trades even with, or it does better than. And if you do not kill it, which is fairly hard to do on the turn it comes down, it will just eat all of the weapons in your deck, and you will not be able to play those weapons again. So that means that Armory might actually have to develop some new strategies, which I'm down for. Armory has been the same deck since Tier 1, or since... it has not been exactly the same deck, but since the Empty Throne was out, the deck has always had Rise to the Challenge, Auric Runehammer, Harsh Rule, Torch, Vanquish, Ikaria, and Throne Warden. And, like, it's just played those cards. And Starsteel Daisho. And then, like, we got some Shadow in it for... the Smuggler's Stash, but that eventually went away. We had some blue in it. Ikaria Blue has been around since set 1, and that hasn't changed at all. It just runs Wisdom of the Elders and Hailstorm now, and a couple of other things. So, like, this deck kind of needs a little bit of change, so I'm actually okay with this hate on that front. On the other hand, this card actually doesn't hate as much as you expect it to. The infiltrate ability is fairly hard to get off. It's probably going to force your opponent to harsh roll, but if they do not harsh roll because they just kind of mess up, they can probably still at least rise to the challenge for the weapon that they most need, and then hope to draw Ikarias or other things to get themselves across. Getting hit with Lethral Provocateur does not end the game for you, especially if you have Reforge or Disjunction or any number of other cards that you might be running in Armory decks to recur those weapons and get yourself some benefits that way. So, like, that alone is not that amazing. And also, it's kind of a drawback if you are discarding weapons from a deck that wants to play those weapons through Honor the Fallen or any other number of cards like Reforge. So, yeah, this could potentially enable your opponent to do some things that he'd rather like to do. Maybe not so great for you. It is a really powerful and fun infiltrate, and I'd say that, like, this is like that certain kind of shadow glee that you get where you're just like, ha ha ha, I did something amazing, even though it isn't actually as amazing as it seems. But it's still really fun. And yeah, no, I actually kind of like this as a hate card. I think the stat line's okay. I think it's definitely playable. It's not outrageous. It's not actually all that powerful. It's a little bit weird. I'd kind of really dislike it in some senses because shadow cards just kind of have that, like, that feeling when you're on the other side and you get hit by this. It's just terrible. I've been griping about In Cold Blood all day because I still do not like the design of that card at all, but this one seems fine. I'm pretty down with it. Seems like a fairly reasonable hate card, and for a type of deck that we don't really have good hate for, so I'm down with it. Okay, I think we're nearing the end of the list, or perhaps at the end of the list even. We have Manufacture, and that might actually be our last one. Warp, create, and draw 3/1/1 Grenadin. This was one of the cards that was spoiled with Inspire for obvious reasons. It is a assembly line that you have to pay for twice, but you get to draw the Grenadin, which is really useful if you're playing with Crown of Possibilities, with Inspire effects, or with any other number of things that you want to do with Grenadin. So, like, also, you get to pay for the card off the top of your deck, which is cool, because, like, there are now enough Warp cards to actually maybe run a Workshop Forge style deck. And not only that, like, you get an extra card of advantage out of that. I would say this card is pretty reasonable. Like, it's slow, but seems like it would be pretty fun to have in a limited format, and obviously there is just some interesting rank shenanigans that you can do with this, where you get to draw yourself some Crown of Possibilities bonuses or some Inspire effects and go to town. It's a fun red card. I'm down with it. It's a good red card advantage card, and there's always room for more of those. Okay, I think we're done. I think that's everything. We'll let chat know if I missed any, but I think we're good. So, my name is Pojo. This has been the Eternal Spoiler Breakdown, and I'm sorry for such a long one. It was a lot. We had a lot to break down, but Fall of Argenport must be releasing soon, and we will be there to play it, hopefully, when it is. But I will be gone for the week following this one, the 4th of July week, and I will be posting up Eternal Basics videos, I hope, in that interim. I will also be trying to stream from a Wi-Fi hotspot that I have purchased for exactly that purpose. Yeah, if you guys want to support the stream, just feel free to subscribe or follow on Twitch or YouTube. I really do appreciate it, and we will be now heading off to take a quick break before we get back to making some Eternal videos. So, to the YouTube folks, thank you so much for watching.